Maricel Tejeda, news anchor for Telemundo Orlando and Noticias Florida. Thank you so much for joining me. On Earth Day, April 22nd, the Telemundo stations will broadcast a documentary about the impacts of climate change in our lives. It will have subtitles in English, so mark your calendars. So in the next 30 minutes, we are going to be talking about climate change and share some additional stories gathered during our journalistic and scientific expedition. And I will be joined by Telemundo Station Group meteorologist Gabriela Dellan, who led the science research of this documentary. We begin our coverage in Alaska, where climate change is really leaving a mark. The United States Environmental Protection Agency says that over the past 60 years, most of the state has warmed 3 degrees on average and 6 degrees during winter, causing sea ice retreat, coastal erosion, permafrost melt, among other effects. And what has many worried is that this could accelerate even more.
There's no doubt there are cyclical patterns that we have no control over at all.
Below the snow-covered mountains of Alaska, Mother Nature is sending us a warning.
The current trajectory is this change is coming.
Increasing temperatures over the years are rapidly warming the region, and the impacts are felt at Eagle Crest Ski Resort in Juneau.
I've heard Alaska being described as like the canary in the coal mine, right? Because we're very amplified, this impacts of ocean temperatures and climate change. It's very pronounced here, and it's kind of just a signal and an indication of what's likely to continue spreading.
Telemundo meteorologist Gabriela Dellan and I visited the place in November 2023 as part of our research during the production of the documentary Our Planet, Voices of Climate Change. Skiers, taking advantage of a much-anticipated snowfall, help keep the sport alive under challenging times.
If things keep going the direction they are, there's a good chance we're going to lose the ability to come skiing here, or at least it won't be consistent.
What we've seemed to spot is our winter weather is very much affected by what the ocean temperatures are doing. So when we have an El Nino, which is like this year where we have very, very warm water off the coast, it makes it difficult for it to snow at the bottom of the ski area. On a La Nina cycle, man, we will have 20 feet of snow, and the water temperature is colder, and it brings more consistent snowfall to the mountain.
The biggest thing that I can notice is just the Mendenhall Glacier here in town. Every year I go to it, and you're always surprised at how far back it is. And in fact, you're not even going to be able to see it from the visitor center very soon.
As warmer temperatures take a toll on the lives of Alaska residents and the environment,
There's lots of different impacts on humans, of course, from the fishery perspective.
scientists from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in Juneau investigate a marine heat wave.
To help us understand how to manage for it, and more than anything, it's going to be how to adapt to the changes. Because for many of these changes, we can certainly, what you've heard, there's lots of things we can do to try to slow down the change that's occurring.
The marine ecologist has seen how the warmer waters alter ecosystems and habitat.
All of our data sets show change. And so it's a matter of adapting to that change.
These warmer waters have also had a negative impact on salmon.
In some cases, the salmon aren't returning to the rivers, or the rivers, we had a drought year too, following the heat wave, where there wasn't sufficient water in the streams for the salmon to return, and that affected future returns.
This family has been net fishing salmon for 30 years and has experienced the changes.
2019, 2020, 2021, actually, the U.S. Department of Commerce declared an emergency because of our salmon fishery decline. And so they actually halted fishing in some areas of Alaska, which has a domino impact to the economy because we have commercial fishermen, we have subsistence lifestyle in Alaska that depend on these fish. And when the government says, halt, stop, no more fishing, we need to give the waters time for those fish to, multiply and come back. And so that is a big domino impact for us in Alaska.
The effects of climate change are being felt across the region, and polar bears are feeling it too.
Polar bears are considered a threatened species. They're vulnerable because of the changing sea ice. Polar bears rely on sea ice. There are more storms because temperatures are a bit warmer. Again, those big storms are eroding villages. Literally, people's homes are washing into the ocean. due to climate change.
Now, moving to California, we met with the professor in the Monterey Bay who is leading the way on fog research. Part of the data is supposed to tell us if the fog is disappearing due to climate change. A cool and calm morning at the Monterey Bay in California offers a nice opportunity to Dr. Daniel Fernandez to check on his research instruments. He calls them fog catchers.
It is helping us understand the water cycle and how fog can contribute to it, and also perhaps how we can make better use of the fog and get a better appreciation of water by trying to collect water from fog.
A simple invention at the University of Monterey Bay that provides valuable information about the behavior of the fog in the bay while catching it as it is transformed into water when it touches the metallic net attached to a computer that generates the data.
There are some areas in California where I can collect 4 liters per day on the average. It depends. Some days I may have 8 liters, some days I'll have 0, but on the average 4. Right around here, probably more like a half liter per square meter per day.
Understanding unpredictable weather patterns that he says are caused by climate change across the state.
We're unsure of what the impacts of climate change are going to be on many things, including on fog. Some studies indicate that fog has seen a reduction as a result of climate change. My own studies aren't long enough to be able to say that. I've seen periods of greater fog and periods of lesser fog within the last 12 years.
The experiment could help understand unpredictable weather patterns related to climate change. During the record-breaking warm temperatures across the globe in 2023, more fog was visible in the region. The doctor explains more data is needed to determine if, in fact, there is a direct relation.
It's not always a direct relationship between what's happening in climate change and what's happening with fog. Long term is going to be different from the short term, and there may be bumps in the road. We may see bigger fog years on hot years and then very, very dry fog years.
The planet is already too warm. Some who feel it the worst and literally feel like their skin is burning up are the thousands of field workers in California. We take you there in the next report. Near Los Angeles and Kern County, thousands of agriculture workers are at full speed in the early hours of the day. There, you find Carmen. She's been working there for nearly 20 years. By 11 in the morning, she's on her way home to rest.
El año pasado me insolé cuando estaba como a 116 grados.
She says last year she suffered a heat stroke.
Aunque sí se miren cansados, fatigados, pero nunca se quejan.
Many of the workers don't speak English or Spanish. They communicate in a native dialect called Mixteco.
Mucha gente no entiende qué es el golpe de calor.
Fausto Sanchez recognizes they have been dealing with warmer temperatures in these fields and provides programs to make sure his team is cared for.
A la gente ya no les dan las horas que les dan.
When it's too hot, they have to go home. And when it rains, they also lose hours of work. No extreme weather is good for the workers, nor the harvest. And according to NOAA, during the beginning of 2023, powerful storms dumped 32 trillion gallons of rain and snow in California, reaching a record. In just 15 years, flooding along our coast is projected to happen up to 3 times as often as today. That's because sea level rise driven by climate change is accelerating. The problem is already costing more than $1 billion in damage every year and growing.
A lot of people had to move out across the street right there because their houses were damaged.
Americans on every coast are living the reality of sea level rise. In Charleston, the ocean can spill onto streets 10, 15 days a year, and in just 15 years, NOAA projects that will triple 45 days every year.
We don't know how you survive that, so we have to prepare for and plan for our infrastructure to be able to manage that. And it's expensive, it takes long planning and long vision, and it's also disruptive. But if we don't do it, are we giving up on Charleston?
Charleston has a $1 billion project underway to raise seawalls and reroute floodwater. And short-term, many cities like Charleston rely on sandbags and mobile pumps when they expect flooding. But what about when it's unexpected?
It's hard to predict flood days, right?
Greg Dusek is one of the scientists at NOAA working to better predict high tide flooding. Because right now, on average, those flood days are only correctly predicted 35% of the time. Weather is one factor, and another is that big stretches of the U.S. coast, sometimes hundreds of miles, don't have a tide gauge.
We're going from covering multiple states in an entire region, down to talking about specific communities, and then eventually down to, every quarter mile along shore having a specific flood prediction for that location.
Known as CORA, NOAA's Coastal Ocean Reanalysis will fill in the gaps with hyper-local data, better predicting all the ways sea level rise impacts our coasts.
Here in California, storms, high tides, and rising seas can wash the land out from underneath roads, train tracks, and people's homes.
Which happened up and down California's coast during this winter's storms, given a boost by sea levels creeping higher and increasing the importance of NOAA's work.
So we'll be able to provide more information to underserved communities that don't have a tide station. And they also don't have the resources necessarily to do all of this research themselves. So they really rely on NOAA as an authoritative data source.
They've already begun testing CORA's flood forecasts on the Atlantic and Gulf coasts, and if all goes well, they hope they can roll that out nationally in the next 3 or 4 years. And that will be good timing, because every year that goes by, sea level rise is accelerating. In Santa Cruz, California, I'm National Climate Reporter Chase Kane.
Coming up, Telemundo meteorologist Gabriela De Jan joins us on this discussion about climate change. Stay with us. For staying with us. Meteorologist with the Telemundo station group, Gabriela De Jan, joins me now to discuss mitigation and adaptation to the impacts of climate change. Hello, Gabby.
These are definitely two very important words, and we need to differentiate them. So when we talk about adaptation, is the action to reduce emissions that cause climate change. So we are talking about clean energy. Those are examples for mitigation. Then when we talk about adaptation, that's something that we are already probably experiencing and we don't know about it, is the action to manage the risk of climate change. So we're already taking actions of things that we're already experiencing. For example, flood protection, if we are moving communities away from areas that are the sea level is going to rise. So those are examples of adaptation, and this is basically the future. Adaptation is definitely going to be very important as long as mitigation, and they both need to be combined to battle climate change.
Gabby, is there a division about climate change among the science community?
Is that, look at this number, 99% of scientists, of climate scientists, agrees that climate change is not only happening, but is caused by human activity, primarily CO2 emissions. So I think at this point, asking that question, it's a little too late in the game. We need to concentrate our energy on finding solutions. This is not a scientist problem, this is a humanity problem. We're all being impacted by it, and this is why we need to understand now that the data is there to prove that climate change is happening, and we need to move forward finding a solution.
Gabby, it was a true pleasure working with you on this documentary. What's your takeaway after completing this project?
Thank you so much, Giselle. It was such a pleasure to work with you and the whole team. And my biggest takeaway was going to Alaska, the last frontier, and seeing Hispanic communities not only living there, but also finding solutions for climate change, which was very interesting. We met with Samaris. She's from Puerto Rico, and she has been living in Alaska for the past over 10 years. And we did the interview in this beautiful place, and the first thing that she noticed, the lake was supposed to be covered in ice, and that was not the situation. So I would say that was the common denominator. Every place that we went to, people describing how things are different. And now we're connecting all those dots and basically connecting all these people with the same problem, which is climate change. And this is important, and we're giving them the voices to explain what they're experiencing. And for us, we need to understand that the planet is not doing anything wrong. It's us who's causing the damage. And we need to heal the planet, not steal the planet for future generations.
Thank you, Gabby. Now, when we come back, I will share details about the documentary Our Planet, Voices of Climate Change, produced by journalists and meteorologists from Telemundo stations across the U.S., Puerto Rico, and Mexico. Many Hispanics in the front lines of this battle against the impacts of climate change. Meet some of them right here. Climate change has turned into the most important story of our time. It is one that affects and connects us all. And Hispanics are leading efforts to research and learning how we can protect our planet.
Así que esto es un problema real.
It is a real problem, says Samari Seguinot Medina. She's been living in Alaska since 2009.
Hay como 5 comunidades que están siendo planificadas para ser relocalizadas.
The Puerto Rican researcher tells us that remote communities in northern parts of Alaska have had to relocate due to coastal erosion because of melting glaciers. According to the 5th National Climate Assessment, the region is warming up 3 times faster than the rest of the nation. In the fields of California, thousands of Hispanic farm workers say the heat has gotten worse over the past years. Climate change is playing a role.
Pérdida económicamente, ¿por qué? Porque no llevamos el mismo salario para la casa.
Carlos Contreras supervises the harvest and says they bring less money home when their days are cut short due to unbearable temperatures. NASA's 2023 climate change report on record-breaking temperatures was eye-opening for many.
Un llamado a la acción.
Edil Sepúlveda, a NASA researcher, helped prepare that report.
Las predicciones que estamos viendo hoy en día no sorprenden del todo.
During Telemundo's climate change coverage, Edil explained that scientists aren't surprised because the effects felt around the world are exactly what was being predicted. In McAllen, Texas, students from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley are in search of solutions to minimize the effects of climate change on daily life. I feel proud, says Fabricio, who explains their research to promote sustainability in agricultural system will help farmers adapt to the irreversible effects of climate change. Farmers in the South work to protect crops from a late freeze as spring officially begins. But for many fruit trees and crops, spring began weeks ago. That's one of the frequent challenges for America's farmers, increasingly battling extreme temperature swings, floods, and drought, all driven by climate change. National climate reporter Chase Kane talked with the chief scientist from the U.S. Department of Agriculture about the growing problem and what they're doing about it.
You can see it in the fast, early bloom of DC's iconic cherry blossoms. And you can feel it with stinging prices at the grocery store, up 25% in 4 years.
They're ridiculously high.
Human-caused climate change is throwing off nature's cycles, and we are quite literally paying the price. It shows up in both individual extreme weather events and the long-term trend, like the newly updated plant hardiness zones, a map guiding farmers and gardeners what to grow where. And look at how it's shifted since 2012, as the coldest days got a lot warmer.
Our farmers who are at the front line of making sure that we have an abundant, safe, nutritious food supply in the country, they're being challenged right now by climate change.
The chief scientist for the U.S. Department of Agriculture pointed to Georgia, simultaneously losing the winter chill that fruit trees need, while also facing extreme weather, which last year meant the peach state produced hardly any peaches, losing 90% of its crop. Similar things are happening in New England.
We lost 30 acres worth of vegetables.
To oranges in Florida, blueberries in Michigan.
They're starting to swell up, and that's not good for mid-March.
Strawberries in California.
We're down about 90%.
Even cattle ranchers in Texas, as the state's biggest wildfire scorched more than 1 million acres of pasture and killed thousands of cattle. Over the last 2 decades, federal data compiled by the Environmental Working Group shows 2/3 of all crop insurance payouts were caused by extreme weather closely linked to climate change, drought, floods, and heat, totaling more than $100 billion. And that's the kind of thing which makes food more expensive. It's also why the USDA is working to develop crops which can withstand the new realities of climate change.
The key word in this equation is resiliency. And how do we help farmers be more resilient? And so we have to develop varieties that have an opportunity to be more tolerant to heat, drought, flooding, because we cannot just pick up agriculture and move it. We have to learn how to be resilient where we are. And that's what our scientists are working on every day.
In New York, I'm National Climate Reporter Chase Kane.
As the world continues to warm up, scientists are studying the rainforest of El Yunque in Puerto Rico. They want to see how the vegetation reacts to a warmer planet. The eastern mountains of Puerto Rico are home to the rainforest El Yunque. Among the thousands of acres protected by the U.S. National Forest System, we find Dr. Tana Wood's experiment.
The purpose of this project is to provide a window hundreds of years into the future and to a warmer world and what this might mean for the future of tropical forested ecosystems.
She's leading a team of scientists who gather data to study how the plants react to warmer temperatures.
The way that we're warming the experiment is we have an array of infrared heaters that are warming small areas of forest 4 degrees Celsius above ambient temperatures 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So it's running all of the time.
So far, they've noticed the plants around the research center have more of a brown color than the unheated control areas. And they were shorter, just like what happened in 2017 after Hurricanes Irma and Maria destroyed most of the island's forest cover.
And to provide tropical specific data for people that are trying to improve our ability to predict climate moving forward into the future, because these forests are so important for cycling carbon on a global scale. But it also provides us an understanding of what the future of these forests themselves might be. What will these forests look like as they continue to grow under these warmer conditions?
Giving scientists a chance to study how tropical forests will fare in a stormier future.
Will they grow back in the same way when they're experiencing the stress of warmer temperatures? Or will they be able to adapt and come back?
In the next and last report, news anchor Iris Delgado speaks about Telemundo's commitment to the environment and the importance of speaking about climate change.
In an effort to dive deeper into environmental issues such as extreme heat and other climate events, a team moved by curiosity and its commitment to educate our community, to tell the story that links us together. This enormous undertaking began in August 2023, when a team of journalists and meteorologists from various Telemundo stations joined forces.
Este grupo de estudiantes está buscando la manera de fortalecer y promover la agricultura sustentable.
Así es, Giselle, y es que la idea es que el proceso sea más costo efectivo y beneficioso para el medio ambiente.
Extensive editorial meetings, many miles traveled, hundreds of hours of meticulous work, logistics, and getting to places such as California, Texas, Alaska, Puerto Rico, Mexico, and Florida.
Mira, Gaby, este es el otro viñedo del que nos habían hablado. Se encarga justo una familia hispana de ello y llevan muchos años trabajándolo y han tenido que adaptar también sus técnicas para poder sobrellevar el cambio climático.
Cinematography that's simply original and majestic. Human connections in every city visited. Meteorologist Pablo Núñez from Telemundo Houston, Brenda Cantú from Telemundo McAllen, Alexis Orengo from Telemundo Orlando, and Ariel Rodriguez from Telemundo 51 in Miami. journalist Claudia de la Fuente from Telemundo San Francisco, news anchor Duny Elvir from Telemundo Los Angeles, and Ana Méndez from Telemundo Mexico also collaborated. And leading the expedition, journalist Giselle Tejeda from Telemundo Orlando and Gabriela De Jan, meteorologist for Telemundo Stations.
Desde niña me apasionaban las ciencias y cómo se formaban las nubes. Ahora, como adulta y meteoróloga, el compromiso es más grande.
It's the pursuit of valuable information, turning a complex issue into an intimate experience with planet Earth.
From all of us here at the Telemundo Station Group, thank you so much for watching Our Planet, Voices of Climate Change. It airs on April 22nd. Until next time.